welcome to your first gig as a student trustee, and we look forward to your input through the whole year. I'd like to call on Trustee Leclerc to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous people who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory, within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and the allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fire Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat people. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Thank you very much. With regard to attendance, we have regrets from Trustee Nancy Armstrong, and other than that, all trustees are present. I need a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Trustee Buckler, seconded by Trustee Cook. All those in support? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest for this meeting? Seeing none. We have a report to be received, and just to give some background on the purpose of this report, last June, there were concerns expressed for personal safety and security in the boardroom. Concerns were expressed by trustees as well as staff, and we felt there was a need to put a pause on personal attendance by the public until we could consider safety protocols. So with that in mind, administration has prepared a report for our consideration, and the recommendation is that we accept the report, which would allow the public to return to the room effective with the September 19th board meeting. So the report is now open for discussion. Don't know if administration has prepared any comments prior to, no? Okay. Then we'll open it to questions from trustees, and maybe I'll just go around the room. Might be easier. I'll go around, okay? Yep. Do you have anything, Trustee Cook? Not right now. Okay, Trustee Leclerc?
So I have a number of comments. The first comment would be that I'll talk about the sign-in first, visitor protocol, trustee protocol. I do not believe it's appropriate for trustees to be signing in when they arrive because it makes us more trackable, whether we're in the building or not, what time we sign in, that type of thing. So I do not understand why trustees would be requested to sign in, because we're not guests. We're elected representatives. We should not be signing in on a registry that is for visitors. Like I said, I find it troubling because it's trackable. The use of security guards, I just don't understand why we would use security guards to provide security to the level that we're providing. It's three security guards. They're unarmed. They have no authorities. They have limited authorities, I should say. They have civilian powers of arrest while they're on the premise. They're not really qualified to provide the kind of level of security that we need. For the price that we're going to pay for 3 security guards, we could have a contract duty officer working, and that contract duty officer could be at the front door while guests are arriving, visitors are arriving and signing in, and then sit over at the wall while we are conducting our business, and then that officer has full powers under the criminal code. And I mean, quite frankly, I think we'll get better behavior with a police officer present as opposed to a security guard. Security guards mean nothing to the public. Um, no disrespect to the security guards, I just don't think it's appropriate. The other thing I think is that I don't think we adequately address the fact that our staff is still sitting with their backs to a gallery of people that can easily gain access. So what I think we need to do, I think we need to build a barrier that runs from that corner where the red button is on the wall all the way across, which would consist of plexiglass or whatever, a raised barrier, which would make it impossible for anybody to come through. The only people that enter through this door or that door would be staff or trustees, and any visitors would have to enter through the door behind the collapsible wall. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Sorry. Does admin want to comment at this point, or do you want me to keep going?
I think we keep going so that we hear everything so that we
Okay.
can respond.
Okay. Trustee Nelson, did you have any questions or concerns?
My only concern about what is being suggested is parents are coming to be heard, and with the increase of security, it makes it more hostile to some extent, especially for those who are coming specifically to address concerns, and that's it. I understand that there is some need for security. I'm just not sure that amping up with police would be the solution, but I'm open to hearing everybody else.
Trustee Sipkar?
Yes, thank you. I had a few questions. One was related to Barry Horrobin, who attended. What was his rationale for the 3 security guards as opposed to some kind of off-duty officer? So I suppose that's my first question. My second question is related to how much do we foresee this adding to our budget? And was this the most cost-effective way forward? And then thirdly, I had a similar concern to Trustee Leclerc, although I didn't think it through that in depth in my mind, around some kind of barrier between the public as well. Our room is a little awkward in that we have a lot of unused space in the middle here. We have, people's backs. Was there any thought to reconfiguration of the actual, seating and things like that, in addition to some kind of barrier? I'm just curious how that meeting went with Barry Horrobin. I've worked with him before. He often has really great suggestions. So I'm just curious if this was kind of like the bare minimum he was suggesting, or was there a lot more, and what we can glean from his knowledge. Thanks.
Trustee Chin, do you have any questions?
Thank you. My concern is that first is the cost, and I don't, add more cost on that. And second, I think we want parents' involvement, and it's the provincial indication that we have to encourage parents to involve. I'm thinking if the barrier setting up will have a different direction on that. And also, I support a police position here instead of 2 or 3 cars. That's it. Thank you. I think a police officer is better. Thank you.
Trustee Buckler?
I just had a couple of thoughts. One of them was this seemed like a really light-handed reaction to what we thought was a terrible situation that forced us to put the public off. So I thought this was really light-handed. So I appreciate your feedback, Trustee Leclerc, and from your background, it's certainly wise, and I appreciate that. And I forget what my second thought was, but that was my biggest concern is was light-handed for what was warranted at the time. And I would like to see some sound protection for, especially our staff whose backs are to and sitting much closer.
Thank you. Trustee McKinley.
Thank you. One, I agree with Trustee Leclerc on the signing in. I've not liked having to sign in since we started. It wasn't what we did when I first became a trustee. I've never fully understood what value it was for us to sign in. And I know a lot of times I'm coming in with my hands full, and this year having to put everything down to sign in, it just makes it more difficult in the first place. I would agree, one of my things was high-profile contracted security personnel. Was that different than what we currently already had? But I would agree. I would think a police officer presence, if we feel that strongly about that, would be better, in my opinion. As far as the barriers, I'm not a big fan of the additional barriers. I think the presence of an officer, the checking in when they come in, if the officer is there, the need for, I'm not sure where this other barrier was, if it's in the hallway or what that is. I didn't really feel that was necessary myself. Nor do I like the idea of a big barrier going across there. We invite our parents, our staff, we invite students to come into some of our meetings for special occasions. Nothing says you're not really wanted, like a big giant piece of plexiglass going across the back wall. I don't think at this point it's warranted. I hope that we never have the point where I think it is warranted, but at this point I struggle with the idea of the barriers other than we have one downstairs when they come in. And if there's somebody watching that they're not going beyond our board area, that's enough for me. I don't think we need barriers, because a little barrier in a hallway is hardly going to stop somebody that really wanted to go over that barrier. I could probably climb over it if I really wanted to bad enough. So I don't think it's going to stop anybody, and I just don't think it's necessary in the scheme of things. So budget is a bit of a concern. I don't have a problem with the idea of the 2 convex mirrors, if that gives better view for whoever for an officer or whoever we end up having there. I think if that gives them better view to have, then great. I don't have a problem with those being installed. I think that's all I can think of at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report came to a conclusion. I'm not sure all the things that we expressed were shared. I'm assuming this. You know, usually when you get a conclusion, you have some sort of rationale beforehand. But as far as the new thing about this discussion of police versus security officers, I can understand that. I would have thought that the Director of Planning and Physical Resources for the Windsor Police Services would have had some sort of understanding of why we would want 3 instead of maybe 1. I don't know the cost differences, so I can't speak to the budget. I think that when you put a price on security, if people are being threatened, what's the price of feeling safe? What's the price? Is it a budget concern where you're going to take the cheaper because it's cheaper, or because you feel safe and it's less expensive? So I sort of reject the idea of the budget. The budget's going to be budget. We knew that there were going to be changes. There's physical infrastructure being suggested here, plexiglass versus some other barriers, some other whatever, locks, who knows what. So there's operational costs and there's capital stuff. And I would like to know what it is, but there's a price, obviously, for being safe. As far as signing in, I want to say that I have to sign in everywhere I go where I'm a visitor. This is not my building. I do not work here. I do not have an office here. We used to have an office. We don't have an office. So I have no problem signing in. Signing in was explained to me as like a manifest on a building. In any other building, you've got a swipe card, you know that they're there. We don't have a swipe card per se. We have one, but I mean, I don't know how it allows us in while people are at the reception desk, et cetera. I have no problem for fire and emergency, et cetera, knowing that I signed into a building and that they know I'm present. I think that is a security measure. I don't take any offense. I do it at schools. I do it at many, many buildings. So that's not a barrier for me. I'm happy to sign in. And I think it's a good thing that we sign in and know that we are in the building. I think there are things that are politically volatile, just even on the weekend, and you would have maybe got your email today, and the president of OPSPA had to respond to some things where I think some issues that are politically volatile, rather, are even made more volatile with the expression of some leaders. So I find that problematic. I don't see it as something that's going to diminish this year. So I believe that the reason for this report is still very active, even though we've had some time off and an ability to take a deep breath. The question about there's an auditorium divider, and then there's some sort of barrier to the south of the washrooms, etc. There have been many times, because I use a cane, hope my knee's good on Thursday when I get it fixed, but we'll see. I have had to use the back because there was no parking in the front. We don't have reserved parking. It's definitely not our building. There are lots of times that I come in the back door. So I see doors for public attendance at 6:30. Our meetings very often start at 5:30 in order to sign up on some sort of registry. How will people physically sign up? We also coincidentally have a bylaw review committee where we're talking about changing our times, committees, meetings, all of that. So I'm assuming that this is just because it's status quo. Our meetings start at 7 for public, but it's been regular that people will sign up before the public meeting part of it opens up, which precedes a committee of the whole private session. So logistically, I don't understand the 6:30, how people are going to sign up. Where will they be? Will they have to hang out in the lobby? Will they hang out in the in the parking lot until they come in? I'm not sure where they would hang out. So that I don't understand. The physical barrier to the back, if you're coming in the back elevator, doors for public attendance, I'm assuming we're not the public. So how will we be escorted from any of these, from the front or the back to wherever we're going to go for our meeting that should start probably 5:30? It makes sense when there's, I guess, 3 security officers, and I want to note that I appreciate that one's downstairs, one is patrolling, and one is here in this room. So I understand the logistics of having that physical presence. Having been in a meeting where somebody, it was an expulsion, I think, committee meeting years ago, where somebody, oh, you're laughing, do you remember maybe? Somebody who was present definitely jumped over barriers and definitely jumped out, and we had to look at all kinds of, security cameras, et cetera, to see where this person kind of absconded within a nanosecond. And they were well away by the time that we could determine that. I understand the convex mirrors, I understand the security cameras, I understand all of that. But this is again about a feeling of security, not only security. Any security can be bypassed. I'm not looking for, you know, Fort Knox lockdown, you know. So I think that the logistics still aren't, I don't see the logistics for me if I'm coming in the back door and there's a barrier to the south of the washrooms and how I'm going to get to a certain room. Does that mean somebody's going to escort? There's a buzz in from the back? Like, I don't understand. So if somebody could, I know that's nitpicky, but I just would like to see the logistics for any of us who are not public, how we're going to get to where we're going to go. Today, I stopped off at the business department on the way up. I had something to drop off. If I'm here at 5 o'clock, it's closed to the public, but how would I, like, what kind of permissions are necessary for us to roam around in the building, I guess is what I'm looking for. So, and I think that's it. And I want to say I like the idea of the microphone, proximity of the microphone, different from the regular presenters who are from this building and from this organization versus a public microphone. I think the physical proximity is something that should be there. It was very intimidating for student trustees, particularly who were targeted, and for somebody who sometimes needs explanation or a chat or something to be misinterpreted as being disrespectful. I think that's a little easier when there's a mic right here. So I like that idea. I want to mention that. So more questions and answers, but thank you.
Colin, did you have any questions?
Through you, Madam Chair. I definitely agree with the police presence over security. I think that it's you feel a lot safer with your law enforcement here as opposed to just hired security. My main question is on the convex mirrors and the rationale behind that. Just because anyone who's looked through a convex mirror knows that a lot of things are morphed and can be misinterpreted. So I'm a little anxious on if we have security or law enforcement and they misinterpret what they're seeing in the convex mirrors because it can morph what you're seeing, what could happen in that. For the plexiglass wall, I definitely understand why we are having that. The only thing is, I think that that's going to only outrage the public more than it already has, that we were closed. Just having it, I think that we're going to see the analogy that they feel like they are caged zoo animals as opposed to people. So I just think that we really need to consider that before we go forward. But I think that that's everything.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you. So we have a lot here to consider. And I would just like to say a few things since it's my turn. I'm going to share 2 personal stories that have made me really think deeply on this whole thing. One is that during the very intense years of COVID, my husband and his staff were subjected to many, many violent threats. My husband was an MPP during that time. The threats were extremely violent, required some police involvement, and it got to the point that my husband just stopped telling me because it was so upsetting. And it was one of the factors in his decision to retire. And it was more out of concern for his staff who were at the front in a room with very little protection. There were plexiglass barriers to the office, but that wasn't a lot when you've got people threatening your life. The other thing was an incident that happened to me years ago. I was provincially appointed to a board of directors for another organization, and we had a board meeting. It was off-site from our office in another building, and we were confronted with an active shooter. And in the process of, we were like in a fishbowl, and in the process of running for safety, I got shoved out of the way by the staff person behind me when he spotted the shooter, and the staff person was shot. And I just kind of stumbled out of the way when I got pushed. And we managed, except for that staff person, it wasn't a fatal shot, but nevertheless, he was shot in the leg. And we were hunkered down for a good 2 hours before the Windsor SWAT team could pin down the shooter. And the shooter was a disgruntled client. And over the years, I kind of put that out of my mind. I think I had PTSD for a while. And I put it out of my mind. And I think I became complacent about things like safety and security in a situation like this. I totally agree that we are dealing with volatile political issues right now. I don't think it's going to get better in the near future. And thinking back on, what did happen to me and what affected my husband and his staff, I thought, I can't take this lightly. And it's an issue that's being faced by boards across the province. We're not alone. Trustees are concerned for their personal safety. And it's sad that we have to be facing this. It's different times. It really is. And I think that there are members of our society now who deal with issues differently and more aggressively. And I think that we have an obligation to ourselves and our staff to ensure our maximum safety. And that comes at a cost, and I'm not talking about the dollars. It comes at the cost of maybe putting up a barrier and making the public members who attend our meeting feel uncomfortable. But what's the alternative? Is the alternative to allow the active shooter into the room because, oh, look at us, come shoot us? I don't know. It's a tough act to balance in terms of our personal safety versus the comfort of the public who don't often come to our meetings. But when they do, we have to ensure the maximum safety. That's our priority. We have an obligation, and particularly our staff, we have a legal obligation to ensure the safety of our staff. And there will be some cost in terms of the public's attitude towards whatever it is we decide to do. But we do have that obligation. And I hope that tonight we can accept some forms of increased safety and security that are agreeable to everyone, so that we can provide for the safety of everybody in this room. So having said that, we'll go back now. There are some trustees who wanted to comment on the remarks, and Trustee Cook hasn't yet commented, so we'll go to you first.
All right, thank you. For me, this is obviously it's about safety, and I think everybody who comes to our meetings, whether it's public coming to listen, speak, whatever, or trustees and staff, we all have a right to be comfortable and safe. I'm just going back and forth, and with all due respect to Trustee Leclerc, with all your experience, I go back and forth with the barrier, and then it goes through my head. Well, what if? What if we didn't? And what if something happened? Or what if we did and nothing ever happened? You know, I mean, it's kind of like going back and forth. How far do we want to take this? You know, yes, people felt unsafe, but is it at the level where we put up a barrier? And then I'll say it again. Then I ask myself, okay, but are you willing to take that chance? So I go back and forth, and I hear Trustee McKinley, and I agree with what you had said, and I agree with our new student trustee too. But I also agree with a lot of what Trustee Leclerc said. So I'm on the fence, or I'm on the barrier. So that's all I'm going to say.
Trustee Buckler, and then Trustee Leclerc and Trustee Chin.
I'm just frightened in view of the fact that we've been accused of indoctrinating children at what is coming at us. That was my first thought from the first time. I should have shared that. And the second is, as somebody that stood in a plexiglass cage for the last 3 years, ain't killing anybody, but it's keeping me safe. And I mean, I don't like it, but it keeps them safe, it keeps us safe. I mean, I would rather put the barrier up and keep everybody safe than say, what if we didn't and somebody gets hurt?
Thank you. Trustee Leclerc?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So for clarification, because Colin, student trustee Pine brought it up, there's no vision of this being turned into some plexiglass wall, so we're in a fishbowl. I have a picture. What I envision is a plexiglass barrier, so you can still see through. That is approximately 3.5 feet high. It's a barrier. It's not a wall, and it's clear. And the reason it's clear is it ensures that there's a way to see through, but it's not high enough that you feel like you're in a fishbowl. I think the other thing is, and I do have a picture which I will gladly show. It's from the city of Windsor council chambers. See the plexiglass barrier right there? Oh, yeah. Plexiglass barrier right there. That's city of Windsor. And that's the public gallery from. I assume so. Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like.
Thank you for sharing that picture. That's helpful.
Right there. Right there.
Can you send that?
Right there. Yeah, I will. But I don't have everything. Right there. See that staff. So the other thing I will say is that we do have circumstances where we have students or whatsoever have to come forward to receive an award. It can be constructed in such a way that would have a gate that could be opened from staff to allow that student through, or whoever's getting a presentation, and then it's closed. Let's not forget, there's no expectation that this area forward should be open to the public. There should be a public viewing area to watch our meetings. There should be no expectation that they can easily just walk down into our area where we're conducting business. Again, it's not about creating a fishbowl for people on either side feeling caged. It's giving a sense that the public must remain on that side. We've had it where we had to put those little safety belts up. What I'm asking us to do is something a little stronger than that, by keeping the public back there behind, but not building something that is such that it's still a barrier. If somebody wants to jump it, 100%. But it's not uncommon in a chamber, a council chamber, or county council, or that there is some impediment, legislatures, there is some impediment between those that are conducting business and those that are viewing from the public gallery. I don't think it's crazy. Is it going to stop what the chair has gone through where somebody took out a firearm? 100% it doesn't. But, and Trustee Burgess alluded to it, it's about the sense of security. Unless you're going to put yourself in a bubble suit, you're locked in a safe with, body armor on. And let's not forget, 6 months ago, I was saying I don't think there's an issue until I received a call saying that somebody was intending on shooting me. I don't want to go through that. I'm certainly not being paid enough to be sitting up here to be a target, right? So I don't think putting that barrier up is going to cause that much consternation to the public. That's my thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Chin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a suggestion. If we can put a security system at the entrance for the police to check if they have gun or they have knife. I know there are some hospital they have it. I don't know if it's very costly, but it can prevent the case that they have such kind of weapon. And another is that as for the parking lot, that's not very. I wonder. I see that currently a lot of are reserved for superintendents. I wonder if we can give more, courtesy or accommodation for the trustee to use the superintendents, the parking. Cause I'm not good at, the directions, and I seldom use the back, parking. So if there is any vacancy in the front, can we trustee use that, instead of drawing back? Yeah. Thank you.
Just on that, the superintendents are typically at the meeting, so they're already parked, right? So, yeah, because they've been working all day, so they're already parked in the parking lot.
Okay.
Yeah. But
I mean, if there is any vacancy. Yeah, I'm not asking them to give. Yeah, sometimes I see some, free spot. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. So, has administration had time to formulate some response? Maybe Superintendent Armstrong, since you met with the officer mentioned in the report. Would you like to start?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the input because it's very valuable to hear your thoughts. I'll go through your questions. I'll try my best to answer them. I was taking notes, but let me start with the meeting with Barry Horben, who is the Director of Planning and Physical Security for Windsor Police Services. He did come to our building. He's actually helped us in other measures. We've changed landscaping. We've done a lot of other things to address staff safety, which is still continues to be a concern here at the building. So he's quite familiar. He watched some of our board meetings prior to coming to meet with me, and he has followed in the news media in terms of some of the challenges that we have had. Everything that he has suggested is reflected in the memo that we provided to you. There are some items that he suggested that we haven't put in. Specifically, I don't even know how to start this. There's so many questions. Okay, specifically when it comes to the security guards, it was Mr. Horben's recommendation. First of all, we chose security guards as opposed to police. That was the recommendation because previously in other discussions, there has been some conversation about police presence in schools. And even though we're not talking about schools, we are talking about a board facility. And it seemed a little inconsistent to say no in one board building but yes, in another board building, although I appreciate the purposes are different. So that's why the recommendation talked about security. High profile security, I'm going to be blunt. Okay, so high profile security is somebody you're not going to mess around with. They look like a security guard. They have a physical presence to them that hopefully conveys something when someone sees them. Mr. Horban recommended that we have someone at the security counter, at the reception counter, and that individual is making sure that people sign in. That individual is also keeping count because we're going to limit the capacity in the room. And so we don't want standing room only. It's one bum per seat, meaning bottom, not bum. And we're taping this too, right? He also suggested that we have a security guard that's in a vehicle that's at the back of the building so that as people are coming into the meeting and exiting the meeting, they're able to go to their cars and feel safer. And sometimes I've had comments where people have felt uncomfortable or someone from the public has followed them out. So that was intended for that. And when that individual is not at the back of the building and to the front of the building, they'll move the car. When the meeting is present, that person's in the building and they are walking the building. And then they're going back out to the car and they're checking the car. It's going to be an unpredictable format, but to provide that level of security both inside this building, outside of this room, and outside as well. He also recommended that we have 2 security guards in this room, depending on the capacity. So if we have 20 people come to our building, we can fit 33 people in the stadium seating, then you only need 1 guard. But if we know we're having a discussion topic that is really attracting a lot of attention, then you have a second high profile security guard who is again in the building but is sitting in the auditorium. Their job is not to look at the convex mirrors, because I know that got brought up. Those convex mirrors are for people like me and everybody else that's sitting here and can't see behind them. It's not perfect, but it improves the visibility for those of us whose backs are to the public so that we can at least get a sense if there's something happening. It will help us, unlike where you can generally see, we cannot. But those 2 security guards in the building, they're taking notes, review notes. They are watching the public. They are not watching us. If someone gets up and goes to the washroom, gets up and leaves the building, and if they're not back after 10 minutes, that guard's going to get up and make sure, one, that they're not in distress in the washroom, but make sure that you can account for where people are. So that was the purpose for the security guards and why 3 for certain were recommended, but why potentially a 4th may be required and what high profile means. And I've also explained about the convex mirrors. The other recommendation was about the curtain. I call it a curtain. First of all, on the budget piece, the convex mirrors we're repurposing from Prince Andrew School, so there's no cost to those, and they're going to be installed internally by facility services staff. The curtain is like a gym divider. When you have a gym and you're going to divide it, into half, so you can have 2 gyms, for example. Again, that's stuff we have stored at low, so there's no cost to that. Internal staff will install it. The reason why we're recommending that we put that up, according to Mr. Horban, is we want to maintain the flow of people in the building. One way to come in, one way to go out. Because what was happening, we used to have like a flip chart, and we put it there and we'd say, do not enter beyond this point. But the reality is people were. Custodians were coming to me after the meeting, and there were members of the public trying to open department doors. There were members of the public in the trustee lounge. They were all kinds of spaces, and we don't want that. They need to be in this room, and they come in one way, and they leave the other way. And so the way that auditorium curtain works is 99% of the time it's never going to be shut. It's just up against the wall and it's kind of locked in, if you will. At 6:30, which is when we open the doors downstairs, not these doors. So I'll try and clarify. When we open the doors downstairs and reception allows people to come in, they can come up the stairs and they can come into this room and they can sign in. They can still access the washroom. They can still access the fountain to get some water. So they can't go any further, and we don't need to worry from that perspective. Again, it controls the whole access point. The curtain divider comes across, there's a key, and it locks it in place. And then Melissa, presumably myself, would have a key as well as the custodian. We would only pull it across at 6:30 when we open those doors to the public. So if a trustee's coming in and they have to park at the back and they're coming in for a 5 o'clock meeting, there's no impediment. That's not the intent, that there's an impediment for you to come and go. Well, maybe go, because we won't probably unlock it till they leave. We can work out the mechanics of those pieces. But that was the intent for that, again, is to control that access. We considered putting a gate. The recommendation from Barry Horwin was at least put a gate that was at least 4 feet high. You don't want somebody to be able to hop it. Again, you're trying to control the access, but we do have the security, the auditorium thing already in stock, and that wouldn't delay us from opening the board building. What else? Signing in. Sorry, I'm probably all over the place here. Signing in, if you have a swipe card, you don't have to sign in. The reason why, though, we ask you to sign in is because if we ever had a fire and we had to be able to account for people, we can easily get who was in the building from the staff that swipe in. And when we actually have fire drills and when we actually have a fire alarm, the reception is actually grabbing the logbook of visitors, and it comes out with them too. So we can always account for the number of people that are in the building. So it's not to try and make anybody feel vulnerable. We're trying to manage those situations if there was ever an emergency. We're recommending for the public, like I said, that capacity limits, the doors will be open at the reception for them to come up at 6:30. We're not asking them, they cannot bring any signs, any props. You can't bring any of that stuff into the building. We did talk about putting a barrier and a gate. I'll be honest, we did. We talked about it. We'd have to reconfigure, like all of this would need to move in order to do that. Because the space between the stadium seating and that last row where staff or our union partners are sitting it's not wide enough. So everything here would have to ship forward. And then we were just a little cognizant of if there was an emergency we needed to get out, then we could have like 133 people trying to get out just the 2 doors in the auditorium. So that was part of the consideration about that. The other thing to keep in mind is that a plexiglass or a barrier like that, if somebody is bringing a gun in, it's not going to stop it. Neither will it stop if someone grabs a knife and just wants to throw it. It won't stop it. So I guess you have to weigh whether that's helpful or not for you. What else? The parking, we talked about that too. I appreciate your point. It's not always comfortable to have to park in the back. Honestly, I have 2 custodians that park in the front. We do that purposefully because the day custodian starts at 6:30, and it can be sometime, and they're by themselves, and it's a little uncomfortable. And our 2 custodians at the end of the day finish typically around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. So we try and keep them closer to the building. But on the days where there are board meetings, I'll ask them to park in the back. So at least it will free up a couple more spots for trustees. Just going to go through your questions really quickly. I talked about the police. I just want to I appreciate your safety concerns. There are safety concerns for staff too. So I just wanted to highlight that. And this is a workplace under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I need to make this space safe for staff as well. So it's an everyone kind of impact. I'm just reading really quickly here. I get about it being unwelcoming with the barrier, but again, we're trying to watch the flow of people. The other thing is department doors will be locked. We did that before. We'll lock them before we open the doors to the public at 6:30. So if you're here at 5 o'clock and for a private session and you need to drop off an expense report, you should be able to get into the department doors. It's just by 6:30 when the public comes in. We've locked department doors, meeting doors, just because we have had people wandering and it's been a little bit problematic. I don't know. I think I've covered a lot, but happy to answer more questions.
Trustee McKinley?
Thank you. I think you did an excellent job of addressing many of the concerns. One of the ones I had about a barrier out in that hallway was addressed when I realized it was like a curtain that would retract. So it's like, okay, that's not a big deal. Completely get that. The other thing, the convex mirrors, I already had no problem with that anyway, and I certainly understood. It was good to have that explanation as to why, because they're up here so you guys can see back there. So other than that, I think, I don't like the idea of a barrier across there. I don't mind the idea of the security guards, provided we're assuming they're from a different company than we currently have that does the security in the past. Would they be the same
Would
people?
be the same company. I don't know if you have specific concerns though about.
Well, I mean, there have been some security guards up here that I wasn't even intimidated by. I thought I could take. So, so the idea of when you said high, high profile, that to me, I guess you explained that they're going to have more of a presence than some of the security guards we've had this year.
That is
Is
correct.
that what you're saying?
That is
Okay.
what our expectation is, correct.
I can deal with that and having a few extra people, if that's what works. Thank you.
Trustee Buckler?
Are you suggesting that if we use our swipe cards when we come in and leave, we do not have to sign in? Can we do that?
Yeah, it should log you as being in the building. I didn't know I didn't know if trustees had them or not. So that's why the recommendation was in here to have you sign in and out.
That would so much cure the fact that people don't have to know we're here, but the people that need to for our safety. That would be, I have a swipe card that just sits in my wallet all the time. I'd happily use that rather than sign the book. Perfect, thank you.
Yep, Trustee Burgess?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but the thing about a barrier, what kind of barrier? We've seen an example of a not so high, barrier clear so that you could see through it, and that's always less intimidating when you can see through it. You don't feel as isolated as something solid. But we do have these things. I'm going to say that in the 23 years that I've had it, there was a time where you could just walk into a school. There was a time where our lobby downstairs was completely open, had no things. So this is a continuum. It's not something that we're only being reactive to now. It's a continuum to certainly the province understood the idea of security in our schools, making them safe and welcoming spaces, but secure and safe places. so there's always that balance. So we want to be welcoming. We want something that's not necessarily physically where you can't see, but this is a business meeting. I'm just wondering, is there something even easier, like a rope line, a thing that's retractable, something that is easier rather than a fixed barrier at the back that would allow, people to walk by, to be retracted if it has to be. If somebody's at the back and they have a wheelchair and they want to get, in their close proximity to something at the back of the, where the union folks sit, et cetera. Is there something that's a little more flexible? I don't know. I don't think the plexiglass barrier or a rope line or anything is going to stop anybody who means harm. It's the sense of security is having the folks on and the monitoring. It's almost like to put in place so that we've got evidence after the fact. It's not going to save anything. Any of the threats that I've had are to slit my throat. So, and my family members. If somebody wants to, they can find where I live. They know the meetings. We're talking about a security matter that is protected. If we wanted to talk about it in camera, we could. We chose not to. We're talking about details. If anybody wants a detail about how high the barrier is going to be and want to, practice hurdles, we're giving them a recipe to get around everything. So I'm not fooling myself. What I'm trying to say, Madam Chair, we're here to make it a safe workspace, a safe business conducting space, open and welcoming to the public in a respectful way. I'm just wondering if there's something that we could put a barrier that isn't a fixed barrier, but something more like this that gets retracted, and so that if this room needs to be used for our general purposes. It's not just trotted out for board meetings. If we want to have a meeting that for our staff that's larger and they don't feel like they're in the peanut gallery, it should be flexible to our full needs. So that would be my suggestion, something a little less obtrusive.
Trustee Leclerc, then Trustee McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 points. On the barrier, there's no doubt that if somebody wants to leap it, they're going to leap it. Security is what it is. There's no panacea. There's nothing that can ensure 100%. But what a physical barrier does, it creates it's a psychological barrier for people as well. It also increases reaction time, right? It gives you more time to react to a threat, unless it's a gun, of course. If it's a knife, it certainly gives. In policing, there's a 21-foot rule. You always want to have 21 feet between you and the knife. So a barrier would increase the time that you have to create that 21 feet. So that's where I'm at with the barrier. I won't go on. But yeah, it's a psychological thing for most people, that it creates in their mind a space that is for the public and a space that's for the meeting. And then in terms of the security, I mean, quite frankly, I've never heard of, what was the term?
High profile. It was Mr. Horriban's term.
Yeah, never heard of it. And Barry I know quite well, does a good job with the work that he does on crime prevention through environmental design. I actually did say to Trustee Nelson that the one odd thing, if we did use a police officer, was that mixed message that we might be sending. But it's not me sending a mixed message, because I know where I stand. But anyways, the reality is, if we start with the security guard and we don't feel comfortable with that, we can always, nothing's set in stone in terms of what we're doing. Trustee Burgess said, this is a continuum, right? So maybe we start with something, although I never heard of this type of security. I don't have a lot of faith in security. I don't believe in home security systems, because I know that they don't work, because by the time the police get called, whatever's happened is long done. Anyway, so having a security guard here, if there's a real incident, what are they going to do? They're going to call the police. That's the reality. But like I said, I'm not opposed to going down that road if that's what the trustees want to go with. I do know, again, you know, a lot of security is about the psychology of it, and that's this enhanced thing. Oh, we're gonna have these big tough guys, right? Well, most people don't take security guards too seriously from the outset. Maybe this enhanced person does because he or she is very physically fit and intimidating that way. But there's certainly another level of psychological security that's provided by having a police officer present in the room. Maybe we do a blended approach. You know, maybe that's a way to go. But anyways, I'm not opposed to looking at different things.
Thank you. Trustee McKinley, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Almost forgot. I was listening to Trustee Leclerc. That was regarding the microphone. I think there was a suggestion around having a mic at the back. We wouldn't get rid of this one though, would we? Okay, so there'd be two, and that one would be, all right, and that one would be able to be shut off if we felt, 6-second rule, something's coming out that shouldn't. All right, that I didn't have a problem with. I didn't mention it before. I just kind of didn't want to get rid of this one because many of our staff speak at that one, and I don't want them that far away. Okay, great, thanks.
I have a couple of questions. And a couple comments. I think we have to start with something, and it can always be altered, changed, whatever. It's not going to be maybe the first or last time we're going to review our security procedures. But I did have a question. The barrier in the hallway, I assume it's something like what we have here that you just pull across. Is it going to be before the entrance to the cafeteria or just past the entrance to the cafeteria? Because I don't see a lot of room there where the washrooms are, that it would have to be past that.
We might need to do like a field trip. Depending on if you're coming in this way from the front door, it's going to be right after the washroom, but before you get to the cafeteria, just past the water filling station. It'll be on a little bit of an angle, but it will pull across that way.
Oh, okay.
So if you need to access something, you want coffee, then you can just kind of go yourself that way, but the public can use the washroom and they can get some water.
Because I also wondered for trustees to go this way, are we going to get locked out trying to come back?
We'll make sure We'll make sure that, because no one will be able to get in past that gate. So we'll leave.
I've had that happen where I've gone out that way and then tried to come back in and had to come down there because these doors are all locked. I couldn't get back in. So that was a question about our own access. And the other thing, I don't think I have a problem with a plexiglass barrier. Municipalities have them. You can't enter the floor of the legislature at all as a member of the public. And that's all taxpayers' money, same as with education. But I find that in education, as opposed to hospital security or any other level of government, we're expected to be the most welcoming, the most open, the most here, come, and yet we're supposed to not take into consideration our own personal feeling of safety and security in our workspace. And I find that very ironic that there are different expectations put on trustees than there are any other level of elected officials. I mean, I've seen that for years with, trustees have to take certain training courses. For a while it was, I think, mandatory. Maybe I'm going back a long way, but like no other level of elected official is expected to take any kind of training or professional development. They get elected, they're put into their job, and they do their thing. They want to feel safe and secure, they have the plexiglass. They have, whether it's police officers or security, they have all that. And nobody says, you know, why can't I walk into my council meeting and walk right up to the mayor and do whatever, shake his hand or throw a knife at him, whatever. But in education, we're just so sensitive to being so open in this room compared to what has now happened in our schools to make our schools more safe and secure. So it should follow that we should be making ourselves safe and secure. And I said right up at the front, it comes with some cost, and it's not, I'm not talking the budget dollars. And I do believe in psychological barriers, and I think they are effective. And with that, I had a question about if we did put a plexiglass barrier. Superintendent Armstrong mentioned the space issue, that we might have to move everything up. But what if you did the opposite, and what if you removed one row of seats from the gallery there to make more space? Is there a way to do it? You could come straight across in like an L if you removed one set of, that's if the trustees support the notion of that. And again, I think it's part of that needing our staff and our trustees to be safe and secure, and providing that psychological barrier that if you're on that side, you're our guest in our workplace. If you're on this side, you're here to work and to conduct a meeting. So I don't think I'm opposed to the idea of the barrier and the psychological sense that it gives. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. That question about whether or not we could remove that row and how we would get back and forth to back there.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So having had the description of where the flexible concertina thing by the washroom and blocking off the cafeteria, traditionally the cafeteria area has also been used as an overflow room when we've had, I mean, you know, we've had a moratorium on on school closures, but you know, there are other issues that people want to attend that have larger audiences, not necessarily hostile, but you know, that's been our overflow room. So does that mean that we would not have an overflow room? There would not be another area where people could observe in real time, except from the comfort of their own, wherever they are live streamed, where they're on deck to maybe, you know, be a speaker or something like that?
So my understanding is the capacity back here is 130, 133 or something.
33 in here, and then we put 100 chairs.
Yeah. So back in the days that we did use that for an overflow, we weren't live streaming. That might make a difference to whether or not people feel that they need to be here in person. So I don't know. I don't know whether we would need to use it or not, but that's where this is. Right. So that's why I said this is not set in stone, and it may have to be adjusted from time to time. Trustee McKinley?
I was just going to say to that, if we actually anticipated needing an overflow room, which probably wouldn't happen, but in the rare event that it's really big, and I hope I'm not there for a meeting that's really big, that we got an overflow, we could open up that and have another guard. You could just get another security guard to be in the cafeteria and open it up. So I don't think that's a real problem in the event that, yeah, good question. That's my solution.
And I think that those are the kind of things that might come up from time to time, and that would be a discussion between probably the chair, Superintendent Armstrong, and the director to make some of those judgment calls when we're closing a school or whatever we may have to do down the road. Trustee Leclerc?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if at this point we might want to make a motion to adopt the report as presented, to allow for the implementation that's there, knowing full well that we may at some point reach out to the director and the superintendent and say, can we look at what this would look like, to amend to policy, because we know that it's not going to be set in stone. So if that makes sense, I would like to make that motion.
So we don't actually need a motion to accept a report. We have the report, right? You've already received it. It's received. And it's just if trustees wanted to change anything or not accept it. Trustee Burgess?
I would like to move fairly quickly or get an answer on the swipe card thing, because I think that is almost an instant solution. I feel, we need to log in. I'm okay with signing in, and I do have a swipe card, and I've known that it's okay to use up till a certain time, et cetera, and whatever. Although I have to say it was probably issued before the the barrier went down in the whole lobby, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, if there was a mechanism for us to do that at the back door and the front, that would make it a lot easier, and maybe that could be done quicker than the hallway thing and the other thing. There might be a phased approach is what I'm trying to say.
So I'm going to let the director respond because she's been very quiet.
Thank you for that. So there already is a mechanism there, because every single one of us use it, both at the back door and the front door. There's a few at the front door, actually. If the front doors are locked, then you swipe there, then you swipe at the next set of doors, then you swipe at the next set of doors. So that's already in place, and at the back door as well. And then you swipe out the same way. So, Superintendent Armstrong?
Yeah, I think we'll just have to double check we didn't deactivate swipe cards, because what we've done is a lot of people at one point had swipe cards in here, and we basically said if you needed to have an office, a physical work location in this building to have the swipe card. So we'll just double check that yours have not been deactivated.
I've never used mine in 30 years, but and another thing I would just like to couple things. So perhaps admin could send us a little bit more information about under the trustee protocols with regard to using this swipe card. I mean, and the signing in. I don't think there's anything that we would have to adjust in the report, because you could add additional information. And and I was going to mention, when we installed the barriers downstairs at the front entrance, that was for safety and security purposes. No other reason other than safety and security. And there were no complaints from the public. None. And I just wanted to mention that because it used to be wide open. Yeah. Trustee Leclerc, did you have something?
No, I was just going to comment on that. If we can't use the swipe card, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what the superintendent's saying about. I am more worried about that person who wants to track an individual trustee who says, "Look, Ron shows up at 4:45 every time, right?" I understand everything, all the points everybody's been making. So if the swipe card doesn't work, maybe the alternative is having a sign-in sheet inside the security, where we just sign in and it's with the secretary if we can't use the swipe card. I love the swipe card idea, because it really addresses. I do have a swipe card. I think I do. I'd have to go looking for it because I haven't used it in a long time. But yeah, I'm just more worried about that person tracking an individual. You have to get into the mind of somebody who would be looking to target you, and that's something that they would do, is look for patterns, right? Like you said, you could find your address. That's easy. So anyways, if you can cross that one off the list, then that's fantastic.
But I think you've hit on a good point, that if we need to sign in, it should be on the other side of security, at the desk. So we could sign in at the desk, not in the information that's open to the public. And I think that's a good alternative too. So if administration could just follow up on this report to further expand on the trustee protocols, I think that would be appreciated by the trustees. And other than that, the report stands. Oh, Trustee Cook?
I just have one real quick question. So we can conclude that this will all be set for the 19th, is that correct? So the public will be welcome back?
That is correct. Unless you decide to do the barrier, then that might take a little longer.
So the barrier, I think, would have to be by motion because it's not in this report if trustees wanted to make a motion. Leclerc?
Yeah, so I would make a motion requesting that administration look at options for a barrier and report back to the Board of Trustees. How much time do you need?
As soon as possible?
October 17th?
Want to just leave it open as soon
Yeah,
as
I'll leave it
possible?
open, that you will do it as expeditiously as possible.
Do we have
Seconder?
a second? Do we have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Nelson? Do we need any more discussion? Oh, and we're talking about a barrier between our workspace and the public gallery, just for clarification. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All those in support? Yeah, that's carried. Thank you very much. And now we've reached the end of our agenda, so I will declare the meeting adjourned and remind trustees that we have a workshop beginning now in the board committee room. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon with this meeting.